Hey everybody, what's happening there? Brent Axe here from syracuse.com. We are live on the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page following a dominant 62-10 win by Syracuse over Wagner at the Carrier Dome. So the Orange are off to a 2-0 start to the 2018 season. We are here on Facebook Live chatting with you. Get those comments flowing there as we go along here, and I'll jump in there and respond to what you guys are saying about this win for Syracuse. It's all presented today by our friends at Krause Health. So as expected, it was earlier this week, actually, where Eric Dungy, Syracuse's quarterback, said that he wanted to, in his words, annihilate Wagner. They felt there was some lapses in the Western Michigan game. Syracuse had a 34-7 lead in that game. Third quarter comes. Western Michigan storms back, cuts it to 34-28. Remember, Eric Dungy was pulled earlier in that game for Tommy DeVito, has to come back in, give Syracuse the lead again. DeVito comes back out to kind of finish in garbage time, right? It was kind of the opposite this time around. Eric Dungy hung around a lot longer than people expected in this game. It was halftime. Syracuse was up big. Dungy had done his job. He had thrown 4 touchdowns. You've got Florida State coming up next week. And everybody thought this was the perfect opportunity to give young Tommy DeVito, maybe even Rex Culpepper, a chance of me, a few other quarterbacks some time in this game. Dungy actually stayed around longer than people thought. Dino Babers just saying, as you perhaps watched here on Facebook Live moments ago, that, he just wanted Dungy to get some reps. He felt like the passing game had to get going. Remember last week, Syracuse, even though they scored 55 points on Western Michigan, a lot of that was Eric Dungy running the football. Only 4 people caught passes last week. 2 of those were running backs. Only 1 wide receiver caught the ball a week ago against Western Michigan. Much different case today. Syracuse got all the wide receivers involved, including, what you kept hearing on the broadcast was first career touchdown, right? Nykeem Johnson with a first career touchdown. Taj Harris with a first career touchdown. Sean Riley had a great touchdown catch off a bobble pass from Jamal Custis. Reminded me of, remember that Super Bowl the Giants were in? I'm going old school on you here for those of you that remember this. Phil McConkey catches the bobbled pass in the Super Bowl. So the offense certainly got much more of a diverse performance from the wide receivers today. Eric Dungy certainly didn't need to go out there and rush for 200 yards. I mean, he had a solid day out there. I'll just give you his numbers here. While we're talking about it, Dungy, 23 of 32, 218 yards, 5 touchdowns. He did throw 1 interception in this game. It was a great play, frankly, by Morris was the name of the Wagner defensive back. He kind of turned around and snagged a touchdown away from Jamal Custis. Really the only, blip on the screen if you're Eric Dungy in this game. So mission accomplished here. In the words of Bill Belichick, I'm on to Florida State. Like, if you guys want to talk about this game, that's great. I'll get in the comments and respond to you guys. But it all becomes about next Saturday as the Orange are off to a 2-0 start. And you can beat Florida State at home and start 3-0. And then you get Connecticut the next week. Now you're 4-0. And look, do I think Syracuse will get in the top 25 if they can start 4-0? They'd certainly get votes. I vote in the Associated Press top 25 poll. Florida State's out of the poll. So your best way into the poll is to beat teams that are in it. Florida State is currently not ranked. They got, annihilated last week by Virginia Tech. They play Samford tonight, so they should easily win that game. But had Florida State been in the poll and Syracuse beats them next week, if they can pull off that upset, it's much easier to get in the poll that way. But 4-0 with a win over Florida State in your back pocket is still impressive, and Syracuse will certainly get some votes if that is the case. I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but I think a lot of you watched Florida State last week. Virginia Tech dominated that football game. I don't think Syracuse can win in the same fashion that Virginia Tech did because Virginia Tech's got a terrific defense. They always do, right? Virginia Tech is hard-nosed defense under Bud Foster. It's special teams play. Beamer's not there anymore, but Beamer ball. So they beat Florida State in that way a week ago. Syracuse is not going to win that game next week if they can spring the upset in the same way that Virginia Tech won a week ago. I think they'll have to put up some points, and they'll have to win it in a different fashion. And what you've got to be concerned about in this game is, look, Florida State still got a lot of talent. They still got a lot of speed. Even last week, go back to when Syracuse played Western Michigan, and they had a receiver named Eskridge who ran a 4.3 40, I think is going to end up playing in the National Football League, and is a guy that really could play for a lot of great programs in college football. He was getting behind the Syracuse secondary a lot in that game. That's just one guy. Florida State's got 4 guys that have that kind of speed. But you know what? They've got a new coach in Willie Taggart. They're kind of getting used to his style of play. You know, they've got a terrific quarterback. When he's on, DeAndre Francois is a really good quarterback, but he's coming off a season where he was injured a year ago, looked pretty slow in the first game. He'll get going against Samford tonight. I would imagine, as Syracuse did against Wagner in this game. But look, the word is vulnerable. Florida State looked vulnerable in that game. They're going to come in. They're going to have a lot of speed. They've got one of the better running backs in college football in Cam Akers, who can, rip off 40, 50, 60-yard runs, like that. But, look, if Syracuse is going to be competitive in this game, you got to fight fire with fire in the sense of you've got to keep pace offensively. Syracuse has now scored 55 and 62 points in consecutive weeks. 62 points, by the way, the most in the Dino Babers era for Syracuse. Syracuse is a team that when they pulled off their upsets in recent years, Virginia Tech in 2016 and, of course, the big Clemson win a year ago, made a lot of plays on defense. As suspect as the Syracuse defense has been at times, those are usually kind of later in the year collapses. When Syracuse is healthy, they have everybody rolling. Another reason Florida State is vulnerable is it's an early season game. You're kind of getting them when everybody's kind of feeling each other out here. And I don't think you learn a lot in a Wagner game. I don't think we learn a lot about Florida State in a Samford game tonight. So, look, if anything, opportunities knocking for the Orange. They're confident after starting 2-0. And if Dino Babers can get another upset on the resume, nothing but good things there for Syracuse. So that's next week. Florida State, it's noon kickoff, by the way, at the Dome. As for this game, as we mentioned, pretty much as expected, Dungy was great. A lot of younger guys got in. Tommy DeVito eventually played in the second half. I really like what I saw from Jarvian Howard, a younger running back who he's kind of fighting his way into the rotation. Like Dante Strickland and Mo Neal are going to be the guys running the football for Syracuse this year. I think we know that. But I think Jarvian Howard he's got a bright future. Actually, I didn't know this until I was checking out the ESPN3 broadcast of this game, and that he went to the same high school as Walter Payton. I mean, it's pretty darn good from the Chicago area. So bright future there. We mentioned a couple other names, Nykeem Johnson. How about Trill Williams comes out and gets a great touchdown off a block punt. Sean Riley blocks the punt. Trill Williams, who played last week as well and is getting out there on the defensive side of the ball for the Orange. He gets a touchdown off a special teams play. It's the first time since 2008, by the way, that Syracuse blocked a punt and scored a touchdown. Actually, in 2008, they had consecutive games against Rutgers and Connecticut when they pulled that off. So they do that for the first time in 10 years. Wagner's special teams were awful, just awful in this game. They did make one field goal, but they were a mess on special teams throughout the game. Andre Sisco, the starting freshman free safety for Syracuse, already has 3 interceptions on the season. He had one last week. He's the first freshman to start at that position, by the way, for Syracuse since Marcus Paul, who's really good safety for Syracuse, played in the NFL, and I believe is still coaching in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. So he's got 3 interceptions on the season. He had 2 right in his breadbasket today. So, look, this was about experience. This was about reps. This was about confidence. It was about staying healthy. There were no major injuries in this game. So mission accomplished from Syracuse on a lot of fronts here. So let's see what you guys are saying here in the comments. Brian saying, glad to see all the young guys get in the game. Devin Butler still scaring me. Yeah, that's a concern. Butler had some bad drops a week ago. And, look, that's been the knock on Butler. He's got breakaway speed. He's got number 1 wide receiver potential, but he's got to be consistent catching the ball. He did have a few catches in this game today. As we said, a very diverse wide receiver group today. But Butler officially 4 catches, 37 yards. He's really the only receiver who got out there who didn't score a touchdown. Nykeem Johnson, 3 catches for 65 yards and a score. Sean Riley, 6 catches, 54 yards and a score. Jamal Custis, 5 catches, 41 yards, and a score. You're not seeing huge numbers here. Taj Harris, we mentioned, had the 24-yard touchdown. The reason Dungy only had 218 yards in this game, they didn't see big numbers. The Syracuse was often taking over in prime Wagner territory. You only have to drive 20, 25, 30, 40 yards for scores. Rarely did Syracuse have to go up the field on 70, 80-yard drives. They just kept getting the ball either by turnover or by turnover on downs in prime Wagner territory. So, yeah, Devin Butler is a concern, Brian. John says, what do these games against FCS schools prove? They don't prove much, but everybody does it because you don't get a preseason game in college football. So if it's either game one or game two, you need that game where you just kind of go out there, get everything flowing, get the younger guys in, that new redshirt rule in college football, which allows your redshirt freshmen to play up to 4 games before they lose eligibility. It's an opportunity for them, but everybody does it. Clemson played Furman last week. I mentioned Florida State's playing Samford tonight. Like every major college football program does this. They don't all play FCS schools. Sometimes you play a lower level FBS school, pardon me. But, it doesn't prove anything. You're right about that. It doesn't prove that you can beat a team. Nick Foles, the running back, I think he could end up playing in the NFL. He's a talented guy. Didn't really have a big game today against Syracuse, but you're right, and that doesn't prove much. But you don't want to kill yourself for 12 games either. Syracuse had a really tough, not only non-conference slate, but of course their ACC slate last year. Their crossover game was Miami, and they were competitive in a lot of those games. Florida State was one game. They only lost by 3 last year. Michael saying, why does Babers keep Dungy in so late in blowouts knowing his injury record? That's a great question. I don't agree with it. I think for 2 straight weeks, Dino was mismanaged. Dungy pulled him too early last week in the sense that you're playing Western Michigan on the road. You pull off the gas pedal with, 5 minutes to go in the second quarter, and you're sending a message to that team. And they got back in that game. It rallied them in the third quarter of that game. And look, that's how good Dungy is. He comes in and puts the game out of reach almost immediately. It was 34-28 when he came back in. They score, then it's 41-28, and Syracuse goes on to win. But, yeah, keeping it, he needs reps? I don't think so. And it goes back to the other comment we just answered there. What are you proving against Wagner? You're proving nothing. So keep him healthy, keep him ready to go. Eric's a competitor, and he wants to be out there, and that's admirable. But I think Dino's kind of mismanaged that the last couple of weeks. Ambrose is here. Hello, Ambrose. Jack says, if you're going to play teams like this, why not play locals like Colgate and Cornell? It would at least boost attendance. They have played Colgate in recent years. I agree with that. It doesn't boost attendance. Attendance is exactly the same. These games only get about 30,000 people. Maybe you get a couple extra thousand to come up from Colgate. I do agree with you, though. I think they should play Colgate every year. I think it should be like basketball. You play Colgate and Cornell every year. You can't play both in football, obviously. I'd rather play a team like that. Now, Wagner's kind of local. They're from Long Island, so it's not like this is some random school from Wyoming or something. So, there's a little bit of a balance there. But I agree with that comment. I think you should play Colgate as much as you can. Craig says Howard's from Mississippi. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Who was I thinking of, though? They were saying was the kid who was from Walter Payton's high school in Chicago. I apologize for that. I'll have to look that up. I thought that's what I heard there. You reminded me of Walter Payton on a couple of those runs. Maybe that was it. Brian says broadcasters were the worst. He didn't even know Wagner switched quarterbacks until the second quarter. Yeah, you're getting, I don't even know what letter we're getting at here. The W team, like go from A on down. Al Groh was the commentator on the ESPN broadcast. There was one point when a targeting rule was being reviewed, and even Al at that point is like, I'm just a crusty old coach, and I don't want to get in trouble. What I say here. That was frustrating. The officials in this game, man, how many times do we have to review things that don't need to be reviewed? They were calling penalties 2 or 3 times at times in this game, slowing things up. I know there's certain things they have to review, scoring plays, the targeting rules we mentioned, but I thought pace of play was an issue for baseball. College football, and look, when you got a team like Syracuse that scores a lot, it slows up the game. The TV timeouts, even for a game that's not even on television, even just the ESPN stream, is bad. This is an issue. This is something college football has to look into because it's going at a snail's pace. You're watching college football, and when you get an entertaining game, you don't notice it as much. But man, you're putting 3.5, 4 hours in early. I shouldn't say early. You're putting 3.5, 4 hours in easily to watch these games, and it can get a little aggravating, especially when we got an officiating crew that's dragging along the game. Let's see. Kathy says yes to the orange. Dan with a thumbs up here. Carrie says let the boys play football. Too many replays. I couldn't agree with you more. I understand certain things have to be reviewed. You want to get the call right, particularly on scoring plays. But like the targeting, what's happening is refs are just throwing flags and saying, go to the review. they're just, well, we're just going to review it anyway. I think they should err on the side of caution there. Make the call on the field if you feel it's a call on the field. And, I feel bad for officials in a way, and we'll see how this plays out in the NFL, because there's just so many rules they have to call now. They add rules every year. The helmet rules become an issue. Targeting's become an issue, and they're trying to clean that up. And it's frustrating to see. You do want to let them play. If it is targeting, I think it's pretty obvious. I think it's helmet on helmet. You can see it. It's all right there. But, why they spent a good 3-4 minutes reviewing that one targeting play in this game, it can be aggravating, especially with the pace that college football games are going these days. Something you got to deal with, I guess, but it seems like it's not going the other way. It's getting longer as we go here. And look, sometimes things happen in football. There's injuries and things that slow up the pace of play. But, when you get these officials, the Syracuse Wagner officials aren't exactly going to be your top flight SEC or ACC crew doing this game. But it's not just the lower level crews. It's some of the top crews in the game that what they're being asked to do, what they're being tasked to do in calling these plays, it can be pretty frustrating. And hopefully they kind of address that not only in college football but at the NFL level. So Mike says, Walter Payton, born and grew up in Columbia, Mississippi. He didn't live in Chicago until the NFL. So maybe that's what I heard. Not that he went to high school in Chicago, but went to the same high school in Mississippi. There you go. That's where I'm getting my wires crossed. Thanks to you guys for correcting me on that. Rob saying Butler needs to be more consistent for sure, but I was impressed with Syracuse's return to a multiple passing attack. They struggled to get the running backs going early, but began attacking the perimeter with quick passes and screens, which opened up the downfield passing attack we saw last week. This kind of approach will keep the Tommy DeVitos. And the comment got cut off there, but I think you mean we'll keep those kind of players coming to Syracuse. Look, Tommy's got a gun. Tommy Gunn, we'll call him, right? Not the bad Tommy Gunn from Rocky V. But he has clearly got the best arm strength on the team. It's just a matter of reps. It's a matter of getting a rapport and a chemistry with the wide receivers. He's a different style quarterback than Eric Dungey. I mean, think about it. That offensive line, when they're out there, they're used to Dungey taking off and running. There's a lot of call plays, running the football. Tommy can scramble. He can run, but he's not a running quarterback. He's more of a traditional in-the-pocket guy. So there's a lot of chemistry that has to be worked on there. There's a lot of timing that has to be worked on there. Tommy doesn't get a lot of run with the ones. He's getting more runs with the twos, and there's a lot of mixtures going on there. This was an opportunity to do that. That's why I felt like Dungey stayed in a little bit too long, because now you're getting into games where maybe you're not going to have the opportunity to put Tommy DeVito in as much. Certainly don't anticipate it next week against Florida State. Maybe Connecticut. Connecticut's a pretty bad team, but Dino has shown that he's going to keep Dungey in there as long as possible. This was the game. This was the opportunity to really give Tommy some more run with the ones, have Dungey come in, do your thing, play a half, get Syracuse up big, and get him out of there. And for the most part, they did that. But to see Dungey stay in the game as long as he did, I was surprised to see that, because you want to get – because what did Dino say about that last week? He wants to get Tommy some run. He wants to see what he can do out there. Wants to see what kind of chemistry he has with this team. So didn't get as many reps out there as we thought, but at least he did get the opportunity to get out there and play in some real games. I love that new rule in college football. It's ridiculous. It took till now for this to happen, that you can play in up to 4 games as a redshirt freshman before you lose your eligibility. Why you would lose your eligibility if you play 1 snap before this is kind of a ridiculous rule. Dan saying, I want to be ready for Florida State. The one angle from that potential targeting play was obvious, that his helmet was a good foot away from the other helmet. Review it quicker. Yeah, exactly. They're out there. They're taking, 2-3 minutes to review these things. It just take one viewing of certain plays. It adds a lot of time to a game where there's already a lot of dead space. Again, Syracuse, a team that scores a lot of points, it stops the clock, these things drag on, you add in TV timeouts. This wasn't even a TV broadcast. It's just too much. It's just too much. College football, I don't know who the gurus are to look at this, because, TV kind of runs the roost, as we know. There's going to be TV timeouts. You just can't get around that. But they've got to figure out how to kind of speed this up a little bit here. Orange is the new fast, right? Well, sometimes, orange is the new 4-hour football games, which you don't want to see. Attendance was pretty low at the Dome. Not a shocker to see that. It was about I didn't see it here. I'll pull it up while we're talking about it here, what the official attendance was listed at in this game. But there was clearly only about 25,000 butts in seats at this one. Attendance was listed officially as 29,395, right around what you would think, about 30,000. It would appear kind of tickets sold, and people were fleeing in the second half, but, I don't blame you for that. Next week, I would anticipate probably about 43,000 people. Hope I'm wrong. Hope the crowd is bigger for that one. I think you're going to see some Florida State fans come up for this one. I think Syracuse fans traditionally kind of buy on opponent. I discussed this on my radio show a lot. I call them the Fairweather 10,000. There's kind of a group of 10,000 fans or so that only show up for big games, only show up for big events, Duke basketball games, Georgetown basketball games, right? In this case, that's a name brand opponent. Syracuse is 2-0. There's a little bit of buzz building about this team, that if they can win this game, how big it would be. So I think you're going to see certainly a bigger crowd and a louder crowd at the Dome, although it's a noon game. So we got to get those students in there ready to go. They typically kind of stroll in late for these games. I hope students get free tickets to this game to kind of boost it up and get that atmosphere going in the Carrier Dome next week. And as we said, Florida State's a vulnerable team. It's not going to be easy by any stretch because they've got a lot of speed and they've still got a lot of talent. But what I saw against Virginia Tech is a bad offensive line, and I saw a team that Syracuse can keep pace with offensively. The question is going to be, can this defense step up and make plays? And I brought this up a little earlier. When they upset Virginia Tech and when they upset Clemson, defense made plays. That was a 31-17 win over Virginia Tech. That Virginia Tech team that came to the Dome was averaging 40 points a game. Syracuse, I believe, had 3 turnovers in that game and clamped down. Last year, of course, the defense knocks Kelly Bryant out of the Clemson game, made enough plays to allow the offense to do just enough and win a tight 27-24 game. So that's kind of the formula. You need Eric Dungey to have a big game. He had huge games in both Virginia Tech and Clemson. You need Dungey to have another, Western Michigan type game, make some throws in addition to a big number running the ball, and your defense has got to get some turnovers and make some plays. And that defense, I don't know what you learned today by playing Wagner, but even Wagner had a few sustained drives in this game and caught Syracuse sleeping a little bit on the defensive end. So whatever tricks Brian Ward has up his sleeve, and Brian Ward's come under a lot of scrutiny from a lot of Syracuse fans, you better throw him out there next week against Florida State. Antoine Cordy looked good on the special teams end today. We should note that. I thought of Cordy on the defensive end, but he was great returning punts today. How about Andre Schmidt? You don't talk about the kicker a lot, but that kid has come in, won the competition. We didn't hear anything about him until he ran on the field against Western Michigan, frankly. He's 14 of 14 on extra points, hit a 50-yard field goal today. Look, this stuff matters because last year Cole Murphy and the year before that just wasn't reliable. Murphy he was so hot and cold, he had his ups and downs. You need a good, steady, reliable kicker, and you're kicking in perfect conditions 6 times a year. Syracuse should get some of the best recruits in college football at the kicking position, right? So good to see that Andre Schmidt's off to a great start there. That's another bonus for the Orange. Hey, look, special teams matters. You got to get those points. You got to get field position, and Syracuse is pretty good there with Sterling Hoffrichter on punts and kickoffs, and now Andre Schmidt looking like a terrific find at the kicking end there. I wanted to make sure to give him a shout out there. Rob adding, it's wiser for Babers to eventually choose to redshirt Howard with Strickland, Neal, Pierre, and others in front of him. It may be, but if he shows he can play and he could be that 3rd or 4th guy, then, maybe you let it ride and don't redshirt him because, you could. It's interesting in this offense because there's such an emphasis on throwing the ball, but that's something to keep an eye on, Rob. That's a good point. Some guys kind of jump the red shirt. I mean, Tommy DeVito, we all knew would red shirt last year, and he did. But, I think Howard's showing that maybe they got to skip that and get him out there on the field, and it's important to have depth. God forbid Strickland or Mo Neal get hurt. I think that's a guy they should consider to play for sure. All right. Well, the Orange got the easy win we all anticipated today. No big issues other than a few blips on the defensive side. Dungey threw 1 interception. Nobody got hurt. So it's all locked in now. Syracuse and Florida State at the Dome next week. Can the Orange pull off another upset in the ACC? They've done it in the first 2 years of Dino Babers' coaching tenure at Syracuse, and this is the best opportunity for them to do it really this year because I don't think you're going to beat Clemson again, and there's really no other big-time name. Maybe Louisville, if they're good late in the year, Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium, perhaps, but this may be Syracuse's best opportunity for a big upset name brand win this season. So we'll see if they can do it next week. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook Live. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health. Look for a lot of great coverage on syracuse.com tonight and tomorrow. If you're watching us here on Saturday, my recap will be up tomorrow. Appreciate you guys reading that. I'll fire that out tomorrow morning for you. We've got a new little video that we're doing, too. I hope you can check that out. It's called Orange Weekly. Nate Mink and I, of course, Syracuse football beat reporter, we do a video every week. It's only about 8 minutes long or so. Nice, quick watch, and it's basically just everything you need to know about Syracuse football. We put that out on Thursdays. So look for that coming up later this week right here on syracuse.com on Thursdays. We put it out on all the social media channels as well, so follow on Facebook and Twitter and all that fun stuff, and you'll see it there. In the meantime, thanks for joining us tonight. The Orange get a big win over Wagner, 62-10. We'll talk to you again next Saturday after the Orange take on Florida State at the Carrier Dome.